Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined today by Don Knabe. He is a member of the Board of Supervisors in Los Angeles County. I have known you for some time, and you've been very focused on the safety of children. You're involved in the Safe Surrender Project. You're also looking at children that are at risk, foster youth that have been abused. Talk to us about these children. Who are they, and what happens to them?
Well, I think I've been working on the issue as it relates to child sex trafficking. And, you know, over 70% of these young victims come out of our own system, whether it be foster care, whether it be probation.
It's interesting you use the word victims because for some time in the state of California, these young women, regardless of their status as minors or adults, were not being treated as victims. They were being treated as criminals, and they were being prosecuted.
Well, prosecute as prostitutes, and one of the things we work very hard on, and we have here such thing. There's no such thing as a child prostitute. So we're trying to eliminate the word prostitute. They are truly victims. I mean, they're brutalized, they're manipulated, both mentally and physically. I mean, no young girl, 10, 12, 14-year-olds chooses a life to get beat up or quoted out 6, 8 times a night.
And as I understand it, Proposition 12, which passed a few years ago, was looking at that issue, trying to increase penalties for pimps who dealt with minors in
right.
those
I mean,
brutal
and we
ways.
work on a bipartisan basis. We've been very successful both at the state level, at the federal level, but we had a little side issue there that had nothing to do with our issue.
Still pending.
Still pending.
Right.
And the thing is they were just getting off the hook. And what was happening to these young girls? And this is one of the first things we did with this federal grant was to set up what we call the STAR Court. It's a dedicated courtroom where these young victims come in front of the judge, and they're treated as a victim and not as a prostitute or as a criminal. We have wraparound services with them. We have housing, we have mental health, health care, all the services that these young victims need. And they're given a choice at that particular point because what was happening up to that point, there was nothing around them. They'd come in, the judge would slap them on the wrist, say, you know, you don't want to do that, and let them go. And they go out the door, and the scumbag pimps waiting for them in the parking lot, and they're back on the street that night.
And it's interesting you mentioned those pimps because you know, there's this notion, this psychological theory called the Stockholm Syndrome, which is where the abused wind up with this strange affinity for their abuser. And so, you know, Patty Hearst is kind of the poster child for that, where they run back to them because they feel like they need them, when in fact, they've been the worst perpetrators of all.
It's like almost like it's very similar to domestic violence issue. But here's how it all starts, because many of these young victims have never had a decent family life. They've been abused since they were a young kid, all the way up through the process here. For the first time in their life, this guy, this scumbag, says, I love you. You're the most beautiful young woman in the world. I'm going to make you a star. We'll get you a job. We'll do all this.
We'll put you in movies.
Hugs them, all this kind of stuff. And within 4 or 5 hours, they're getting the stuff kicked out of them at a motel someplace. So that is the target. That is the mindset.
But here's...
And maybe he meant it. And that's what brings him back.
Maybe, though, there's the issue of what to do with these young girls. And it's become quite a heated debate, not just in Los Angeles County, but throughout the nation. You want to protect them from these pimps, but there's the question of liberties and civil rights. And so the board is really grappling with whether these girls should be, you know, I wish I had a better word for it, but locked up for their protection. Not locked up as prisoners, but put in a place where no one can enter. So it's not so much preventing them from going out, it's preventing people from coming in.
Exactly. And I too wish I had a better word, but the reality is we're doing that in other situations, either through our probation halls, but that's a very difficult position to put these girls in because there are girls in the hall that still want that life, and they out them, and once these girls are outed, that means death. But we've moved girls out of here to say to a safe haven, a home, not a lockup, but a home in Iowa, out of state, those kinds of things, to get them out of that life. And I'm searching for a word, and Brad, maybe by the next show I have a better word, but really it's for their own protection. It's a quick example. A few weeks ago, everybody with a hoopla about Super Bowl, right?
Right.
One of the things that he wanted to do was to be able to issue warrants to bring these young girls in, because what was happening, they were being rounded up by their pimps, carted off to Phoenix, and being sold as part of party packages. party packages, 14-year-old girls, okay? So it's so horrific. And so I understand it, you know, legislators that I talk to that are very sympathetic to the issue and have supported things like wiretapping and everything else to put this on that kind of a crime level really have a hard time with the word lockup. And I do too.
Let me ask you.
But it's really for the child's protection.
It's
not to criminalize or to do anything like that. So I don't even know what, we're looking at all the options. All I'm saying is that has to be a potential option. Let's look at the options.
What's wrong with the foster home?
Well,
I understand. It's a leading question, I admit.
No, it's not a leading question.
No, I mean it that way because as I've learned that foster homes wind up becoming recruiting centers.
Absolutely.
So
we opened up with
happens.
70% of the kids that are the victims in this situation are coming through our system. So what happens at the foster home? If they have a strong, loving foster family, if the foster family is really wrapping their arms around these young children instead of just taking it for a paycheck, and not acting indifferent to the kids, they'll be safe. I mean, they won't. But if they're not, and they still have that distance, the child doesn't feel like they're being loved by the foster family, and this guy's sort of hanging out back behind the gate, comes out, you know, and said, oh, let me help you. You're beautiful. You want to get a job in the movies, you want to become a model, you want to do this, and entice them with all those kind of language that they've never heard. Not only in the foster family, keep in mind, this goes back because if they're in the foster system, they're coming out of a family situation where they've been abused as well.
What about the notion that if you put them in a group home, a facility, whatever you want to call it, that becomes a recruiting center?
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's not only just foster families, it's group homes and the whole.
But then how do you make sure that, you know, if this system is adopted, whereby they are locked up, again, we'll think of a better term, how does that locked up area not become a recruiting center?
Well, I mean, that's one of the options we have to look at. I mean, you can't just create a locked up situation so that at some point when they're unlocked and they want to go shopping or something, they're not recruiting. So again, how that is handled is not to say that you're going to create another jail, you're going to create just a lockdown kind of thing like you do sometimes for other kinds of situations in Department of Children. But I would just say that the intent here is not to punish anyone. The intent here is to save a kid from that lifestyle, or particularly the ones, Brad, and this is the most important piece, particularly ones, let's say they come through the Star Court and they see and they talk to one of our survivors. We got survivors in the room with them, and they look at the survivor and say, you know what, I want to change my life. And if they want to change their life, the only way to do that is to protect them somehow. It could mean lockup, it could not mean lockup, it could mean just moving, you know, whatever it takes. Those are the options we're looking at to protect these victims.
Today,
particularly the ones that want to change.
Today, there's no program to mandate lockup, let's say.
Absolutely not.
What if someone wants that? What if one of the kids say, put me somewhere where no one can get to me?
Well, and that's what's happened. And that's what's happened in the probation halls and the probation camps and some of the other situations. But they're not as safe there. We try to protect them through that system, but they're not quite as safe there because, again, inside the system, you know, a probation hall and camp's no different than a jail. The word travels fast.
Really?
Word travels fast. And so there are girls that want to go, as soon as they get out, go back into the system.
So where's the county going from here? It's going to be studied, is that right?
Well, it's going to, I mean, it's study, you know, I mean, I don't mean the study to kill it, but I mean, what we're doing is looking at language and options and working with lawyers and what other options are out there nationally.
Right.
Nationally.
Best practices.
Are they doing best practices? Somebody, you know, because it was well thought out, but, you know, obviously got loyalty up towards the end. And one of my colleagues had some real problems with the language. But I understand that. But, you know, both Hilda Solis and I are very concerned that we're being painted that we want to lock up these girls, these victims. We don't.
Okay. We'll talk more about it when you come back. His name is Don Knabe. He is a supervisor in Los Angeles County. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's California Edition.